G'day, hope you're doing well, and shout out to my boy Logan who's been demanding this video for a while. A couple of years ago I finished Arcane's Prey for the first time, and I loved my time in its world so much that I booted up a second playthrough instantly to see how much more immersive it could be with the objective markers switched off. I wish I had done this for my first playthrough, and it's completely viable. You might have to occasionally check the in-game map and the objective lists because there's quite a few that can be active at any one time, but overall it's no trouble at all to simply rely on the many signs found throughout the space station. This would lead to me having an interest in the System Shock remake, which is even more hands-off. I couldn't possibly do the original version because the UI is just too dated for me, same with the controls. I know I probably sound uncultured or inexperienced with older games, but simply removing quest markers is kind of novel to me. There are games with exploration I have played and loved that don't utilize them, like Outer Wilds or Dark Souls, so it's not as if any game that doesn't have markers is a struggle for me. Growing up, I simply became very accustomed to the ones that used some form of directing the player where they needed to be. This included the mini-maps of GTA, the clearly presented markers of Oblivion, and even Far Cry 2, I would mostly bring up my map to stare at my marker moving through the roads and get a better idea of how to get from one point to another. I never really thought about how this was impacting my experience until the past few years, where exploring naturally and not being led directly has proven to be my preferred way to play. So, just to gush about System Shock a little, I knew it didn't have objective markers. I didn't know it was so non-hand-holding that you're barely given any direction in the first place. You get a short call from someone and the game just leaves you to it. For the first time while playing a game, I had a pen and paper next to me where I would jot down notes for passcodes, things that I thought would be important to investigate, and I used the marking system for the map to note where I had left particular items or spots I needed to revisit. There was something so much more engaging about playing the game this way, and not having a marker pointing me to each exact spot goes a long way in making you more immersed in a game and getting you to pay closer attention to the environment. Naturally, if I wanted more of this, I'd go and play Outward, Gothic, or Morrowind. What I was curious about was if any games that utilize quest markers are able to be played without them. Does the level design account for this? What made Prey so interesting is that once the markers were removed, the game remained perfectly playable because the team had obviously put a lot of thought into making Talos 1 a believable and functional location. Could I get something akin to that experience whilst using a pen and paper like in System Shock in a game that wasn't necessarily designed for natural exploration as the default? I don't have a super long list, I just wanted to present a few open world games and show how they handle this way of playing, and it's not a terribly extensive examination. I'm just giving you some impressions of mine based on a few hours worth of playing in each game. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is up first because it launched with a mode that is supposed to make exploration less about following markers. With this mode, characters will sometimes give you rough directions to a location. In practice, you can open your map, you triangulate where your next point is by reading the directions on the side. For me, I would usually then set a custom marker anyway, so it never felt like it did much for exploration. I was still following a marker technically, and the compass is littered with question marks as well, so it kind of spoils that there is a location you're supposed to go to before you even get there. The idea I had when playing the game for this video was to disable everything and use the map as little as possible. At the start, Phoebe points to the statue of Zeus and says Marcus's vineyard is south of it. It looks like it's morning, so the sun is to the east, easy enough to figure out. Quests need to be untracked though if you're going to play like this, due to the game being inconsistent about when it wants you to explore on your own. Once I spoke to Marcos, he told me to go to the dock. I was planning to climb the statue and scope out the island for myself, only to be shown exactly where my objective was. You can do subsequent missions where it remains untracked, but at some point, without your input, it'll start tracking again and tell you directly where to go. At first, it's easy enough to get around the game. Marcos points directly where we need to go for one mission, and another where we have to go to Odysseus's palace. It's straightforward given it's the only grand location on a very tiny island. I loaded an old save that had me in Athens though, and here is where you see the limitation of trying to play the game this way. I picked up a quest to retrieve an item for someone and was told the woman lived east from where we were. Pretty vague given the size of this place, but a marker popped up anyway, pointing right at her without me even tracking the quest. I don't know how I'd find her on my own, to be honest, when you look at how many houses are around and how I'm not told anything specific, like her house has a crumbled roof or she owns a dog. It would just be me wandering around aimlessly and seeing who I can interact with. Finally, directions aren't given when setting sail, so that part of the game you would have to check the map each time. Hogwarts Legacy is up next. Despite really not liking this game, I did enjoy the visual design and general atmosphere of the school, so I was hoping for a bit of a redemption for it. Unfortunately, it's really bad for this approach to exploration. The minimap can't be removed, quests automatically start tracking when you take them on, and there's no easy way to get a sense of where specific classrooms and such are, other than the game telling you one side is for sleeping and the other is for classes. Heading into the open world showed some promise when a character actually gave me some directions for a quest, only to have the marker show up once the quest started tracking. The open world in this game was pretty bad anyway, so the main disappointment is that Hogwarts isn't intuitive to explore as a newcomer. I could totally see fans memorizing the layout and learning to get around without the need of guidance, but I also think the game should have been more focused on the school and your lessons in general. Some classes you attend once or twice and you're done. A proper focus on life inside the school would have had players memorizing areas on their own. The Witcher 3 has bits of promise, kind of like Assassin's Creed, but for me it wasn't quite there. You can keep quests untracked and the minimap and objective markers can all be disabled, so that's great. Exploring naturally is a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes there are genuine directions given that you can follow, like how Yennefer went north from the first village. Once you realise the sun rises in the north for this world, it's easy enough to get on track. A contract I did had me looking for a missing woman, and I can definitely see someone playing without markers and just getting lost as they wander around looking for her. But I will put my hand up and say that me having that issue is potentially user error, because in hindsight, when looking at the footage, I should have clued on to the fact that there were animals in the area and just gone straight for them instead of what I was doing, which was trying to avoid animals and not have to get into a fight. And it makes sense, right? A woman goes missing after entering the woods. The pack of wolves must have gotten her. I don't know, I'll let you be the judge of that. A side mission in the city of Novigrad had me investigating some murders. It was simple at first, I just had to travel to the docks. The next step was to look for an area near the brothel. I tried to use some logic and figured prostitutes would be looked down upon, so perhaps they're more to the outer walls of the city. I wasn't given any other direction by the person who gave me the quest. He just said, go to an alleyway near the brothel. Because there's no signs or anything to follow, I was just wandering around and ended up getting misled a little bit when I started finding some of the prostitute NPCs, and they were all hanging around streets that weren't even close to the brothel itself. Fallout New Vegas is next, and it's also nearly there. You can't disable quest markers entirely, but if you have a quest you don't intend on doing, you can keep it enabled and the game won't switch it up on you. During conversations, you'll be given bearings for where you need to go, and there tends to be signs that you can follow. A couple of annoyances I had was a bounty mission where I was told the target is usually to the southeast. After not finding much in that direction for a little bit, I enabled the quest only to see she was directly southwest of where I had started. The quest giver did say they like to roam, so maybe that's not entirely the game's fault. Another moment came when I had to go to some ruins to the east to look for rocket fuel. Very vague, and as I travelled in a rough easterly direction, the supposed ruins actually weren't loaded in at first, so I couldn't even just look out to the distance and make some guesses. At least the second part, where I was asked to find some control thrusters, was better. The NPC told me to look for some folk who might trade junk, and I'd had a conversation with a character named Manny about the town's only income being related to junk items. It's not terribly groundbreaking, given I have to have this conversation to even kick off the rocket mission I was doing, but I felt like it showed some attention from the devs to build the world a little, as opposed to having the quest giver just tell me, yeah, go get some junk, it's in the town of Novak. I think I could really enjoy playing New Vegas this way, if it didn't crash and or freeze so goddamn much. Onto Skyrim, and it's also nearly there for me. Quest markers can be disabled, but you'll automatically start tracking quests. If you track the miscellaneous quests, then the game won't change it for you. Having played the game a bunch of times before, I tried to look out for keywords that would guide me and not just run straight to where I knew I needed to go. Ignore the level up thing in the corner, I think it's just a bug from the skip intro mod that I put on. Once leaving the cave, I stuck to the road and came across a sign pointing me where to go. I could have followed Rayloff, but he bugged out and wouldn't leave the rock. Once in Riverwood, I was given directions to leave the town and follow the road north to get to Whiterun. After being given a quest from the mage about Bleak Falls Barrow, and him telling me to ask the Riverwood locals about it, I happened across the bloke and his sister who had an item stolen from them. The sister will come out and actually point out where the place is, and she does also give you a bearing to follow out of the town. Well, eventually she tells me where to go because she kept stopping and turning around to look at me for no reason. It's all very organic for a little while until you get the quest to seek out the Greybeards. No directions are given, no heads up from someone that the path up the mountain is in Iverstead, nothing. And it's very strange to have this very organic way that the main quest is playing out, and then it's almost like they just collectively decided when making the game, alright, that's enough, we can't be bothered doing this anymore, just make the player follow the quest marker. I remember when I played this on release, trying to find a way up the mountain from a couple of different sides of it, and so I can see someone wasting their time like I did if they're playing without markers. I took this as a sign to give a couple of side quests a go, and there wasn't any need to use quest markers, but that's mainly because everything was taking place in single locations, so it was easy enough to do these quests, be given a name of a person, and just look for their house or something. Because the game's more on the smaller scale when it comes to these towns, you're not wandering around too much trying to look for specific people. Overall, it can be very organic and natural, and for the quests I did do, I didn't even have to check the map. It's just that the main quest wastes no time relying on markers instead of naturally telling you where to go. The final open world game I want to talk about is Kingdom Come Deliverance. Pretty timely given the second game is just released. Clearly the devs wanted this sort of playstyle to be a viable option because in the first game, the hardcore mode removes your own marker from the map, forcing you to understand landmarks and which direction is which. It's still a bit mixed due to characters not always pointing you in a specific direction and instead just telling you to go see person named blah or go to a specific building that at a glance doesn't look all that different from others. The compass you have at the top of the screen will highlight the objective when you're close to it, so it can be a bit of checking the map and then you're confirming with the compass that you're heading in the right area or heading for the right person. It doesn't feel as natural or intuitive. More immersion is still added as a whole with the hardcore mode at least, which is great for a game that's already quite immersive. So there's an overview of a few games. Think about turning off objective markers for whatever games you're playing and see if it increases your enjoyment. See if the rest of the design for the game can account for you just exploring on your own. It certainly made some games more enjoyable for me, and even though some of these fall short of being a perfect HUD-less experience, there's enough there for ones like Skyrim that you could still get by for the most part. There's always mods as well that can potentially fine-tune the experience a little more. If you're curious about more games, the question has been asked a lot on gaming subreddits, so chuck your question into Google and you'll find plenty of recommendations. And if the more common sort of Ubisoft style open world games aren't doing it for you, there's plenty of either older open world games or just smaller scale games in general that are very much designed around exploration and turning these assists off. So hopefully you find something great. Until the next video, have a good one.